Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Light After Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Scolari, and today I have with me Patricia or Patty DiRenzo. Patty is an inspiring woman who is nothing short of a powerhouse in the field of mental health and addiction, particularly in the state of New Jersey. In 2010, her beloved son, Salvatore, passed away from a heroin overdose. Since then, Patty has been at the forefront of change when it comes to addiction and mental health in New Jersey. Most notably, she was an integral part of advocating for the passage of the Overdose Protection Act. Thousands of lives have been saved because of this legislation, and Patty continues to get the word out through her advocacy, community outreach programs, and naloxone trainings. Patty also serves as an advocate for the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence and is a member of the Camden County Addiction Awareness Task Force in South Jersey. As a task force member, she spearheaded the effort to ensure every police department was equipped with naloxone, resulting in the first county in New Jersey to have 100% participation. She also plays an important role in other task force initiatives, including training and supplying residents with naloxone, advocating for policies that expand treatment access, increasing prescription medicine take-back programs, and educational events including physician trainings, awareness events, and parent-child workshops. Patty is dedicated to preventing other families from suffering the loss that hers did, and she will continue to be an advocate in the hope of saving lives and lifting the stigma associated with the disease of addiction. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Patty. Hi, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
Just in reading your bio, I am blown away by the things that you have accomplished and what you have done with what I can only imagine must be overwhelming and at times unbearable pain. And as I was reading your bio and as I was learning more about your story, one of the things that I realized is that Salvatore passed away in 2010.
Correct.
And it's now 2020. So is it coming up on 10 years or has the 10 years already passed?
September 23rd will be 10 years.
Okay. So, and today, as we record this, is August 7th. So it will be 10 years. And I just look at all you have accomplished in 10 years. And I just wonder, I would assume for you, it wasn't like this in the beginning.
No, not at all.
So what was that process like of you getting to this place where you became, like I said, just this absolute powerhouse in the field of mental health and addiction? How did you go through that process?
Based on the way that Sal had passed, we were told that it wasn't certain, but it did appear that somebody was in the car with Sal when he overdosed, but obviously left him to die instead of calling to help him. And, after he passed, I had so much anger and so much hurt and so many questions because I just did not understand how that could happen to anybody. Who leaves somebody to die? And the more I kept thinking about it and the more I was talking to people, at that point I was a legal secretary. So I honestly didn't know that much about the field of addiction. I failed in many ways in Sal's addiction, not catching signs, but I know so much more now. And, after time went by and I was really thinking about it and I was talking to people and I was hearing comments, just the stigma associated with addiction is just heart-wrenching to me. And I just thought, this is what my son dealt with every day while he was active in addiction. The way people treated him, just reading comments and articles, I'm thinking, these are people that, they have no clue. And I just kept thinking about it, and I was at first angry at, who would dare leave my son? And I hope something happens to him and her. they should pay. But in reality, after, going through all these channels of thinking about things and scenarios and reliving it, I realized that that person was suffering with the same stigma that Sal suffered with. And at that moment, their first thought was, oh my God, I'm going to be arrested. What do I do? And there was probably fear upon them, and they panicked and left. And in a weird way, I get it. So that's what drove me. I started making phone calls. I don't even know if I was calling in the beginning. I was just calling anybody that would hear me. And I luckily found the Drug Policy Alliance, and they had told me, I told them Sal's whole story, how he'd passed. And they said, we have a 911 law that we've had passed in other states, and we're currently just working on it in New Jersey. Would you love to join us? And I said, yes. So that was where I started my advocacy, because to me, and as you know, the 911 legislation is if somebody's with someone when they overdose, they don't have to be afraid to call 911 because they are immune from being arrested, because saving a life is more important than arrest. And that was how it started.
Wow. Now, how long after Sal passed did you start to become involved in all of that?
It was probably about a year after his loss that I started, because for that first year, I honestly don't remember much of that first year. I think I was just numb, like most parents. But then the anger started, and then you just go through all the stages of grief. And my anger brought me to my advocacy. And that's when it all started. And that was, I guess, 2011. I started advocating and working with them.
And that's how ultimately you helped get that Overdose Protection Act passed. And that is such a huge thing when it comes to addiction, is that, and what I hear you saying is that there was a potential that your son could have been saved if this law had been in place.
Exactly.
Because It was suspected that he was not alone in the car.
Correct.
And just to be clear for the listeners out there, so this Overdose Protection Act, this is passed in different states aside from New Jersey?
Yes, there are other states that have this law in effect, which, I honestly feel like it should be a federal law, but
yes,
Drug Policy Alliance was advocated in different states. There's a good amount of states now that have it, but not every state. If you go on the Drug Policy's website, you can look up all the states that have enacted the 911 legislation. Ours was passed into law on May 2nd of 2013.
Wow. And that offers full immunity for anybody who calls in an overdose in order to save a life.
Yes, and also immunity to the person in the overdose situation. And our law, as you know, also expanded the access to naloxone, because it was first vetoed by the governor when we first went to the vote.
Really?
Yes. But the veto actually ended up in our favor, because after that veto, they worked on it more and we added the naloxone parts of it. So now we can save lives. Now all of our officers have naloxone, and they help to save lives with it. And I know that we're doing a great job here in Camden County.
Yeah, we really are. Can you explain a little bit about what naloxone is and how it works?
So anyone that is overdosing with an opioid-based drug, naloxone will reverse that overdose. And it's a nasal spray. It's very easy to use. There's other forms of it, but the nasal spray is the most common. And you just, when someone is in overdose, you put them in the overdose, the position, and spray it up their nose, and it reverses the overdose. And the good thing about naloxone is it's 100% safe. So if I have it in my house and a child squirts it up their nose, it's not going to do anything to them. It only reacts to opioids. And it's,
wow.
Right. It's opioid based. So if they have any other drug in their system, it won't reverse it.
Wow. So this is something that actually, and I did see you're advocating for families everywhere to have this on hand in their homes, because it sounds like, there's really no danger to it.
None whatsoever. And honestly, if you have elderly parents, grandparents in a home, you should have naloxone. Even children. How many children get into medicine cabinets? Little toddlers. Naloxone will reverse that overdose if it's an opioid-based medication.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many families have probably been trained in the lock zone and have lock zone on them. And I have it in my house, I have it in my car, and I have it in the office because you never know.
Now, do you offer those trainings?
Through Camden County, we offer the trainings, yes. And they're
Okay.
all free. Yes.
And one of the things that you had touched on a little bit earlier is stigma. And that's
Yes.
something that I wanted to talk about because there is so much stigma that surrounds not only addiction itself, but I have found also stigma surrounds family members of those who suffer from addiction. And I'm wondering, what was that like for you? In what ways were you and your family and your son experiencing stigma or discrimination because of his addiction?
Yes. I didn't personally face that much stigma because I was never ashamed of Sal's disease. I didn't. So I shared, I was open about it. I mean, I sheltered a little bit with my family when he was so sick and so struggling because it's so, it just takes the life out of a family. It's so hard to explain to somebody who has no idea what it's like for a family when they have a loved one in the house struggling with addiction.
Oh, it's so traumatic. It's traumatic for the whole family.
It's totally traumatic. It takes every ounce of your energy. I mean, I'd wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is, go in his room and look to see if he's breathing. That's just what you do. And then if I leave and he's home, and my daughter and I were constantly, is Sal home? Is he okay? It's exhausting. It's a very exhausting disease is what I tell people, not only for us, but also for the person who has it, because their whole life is yes, being stigmatized because people don't see the real person they are. They only see the shell, and what they believe in their mind is, an addict, some dirty person, and it's not, and it breaks my heart when I think of when Sal was out in public, the way he was treated by people while he was actively using, because he was such a passionate, beautiful person. And to think that people would treat him badly based on, what he was going through hurts me so much as a mother to think of what he dealt with. And that stigma is just, it's something that sadly causes a lot of people to not come forward with their disease because of the shame of the stigma. And if we get rid of the stigma, more people will come forward and tell their families and share their stories.
Addiction is looked at more so as a choice, and what it really is a disease.
It is.
And it's this vicious cycle that you can't get out of, and it's traumatic for everybody all around. And now you said you have a daughter. You have a daughter as well.
I do.
Okay. How old is your daughter? Was she younger or older than Sal?
She's older. Sal is the baby. Blake is 39. She's just 39 in May. She's a teacher, an elementary school teacher. And it was always the three of us, I'm a single parent, but I'm very close with my ex and his family. We have a very, very strong family bond. But it was always, me, Blake, and Sal. We just were our clique. And Blake and Sal are extremely close. So we all are dealing with this loss, and all in different ways because she's a sister who lost her brother. And people forget that sometimes. That was her brother, her best friend, and sometimes I even forget that.
Absolutely. I mean, and one of the things that I have found that often occurs is any kind of traumatic loss in a family, like what you've experienced, tends to break apart a family. How did you and your daughter's relationship survive the loss of Sal?
That's a good question because I think because we dealt with his disease as a team, you know what I mean? Like we were in it through thick and thin, her and I. And honestly, Blake was more of my rock. I broke down way more than she did, but she has her moments, but I feel like she's more there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the sad thing about that is that when there's a loss like this, I think everybody tends to go to the mother and, because she lost her child, and they, like I said, they forget there's siblings and there's others and there's, a child and the grandparents, but the mother is the one that people really tend to try to, embrace. But we originally, after Sal first passed, as a family group, including my ex-husband and his wife, Brianna, who was Sal's longtime girlfriend, and my daughter and myself, we all went to a group family counseling because we needed to understand that we all grieve differently. We all had a different part in Sal's life, and I can't get mad if my ex doesn't get sad over something I get sad over because we're different. And we needed to come to that understanding. I think that we're very well as a team. We understand everybody, we all understand how each other agrees and what we all need, and we respect one another. And I think that's important.
I actually think that that's crucial. I think what you said
Yes.
is so crucial for families in grief, especially families who are grieving a traumatic loss. Everybody grieves differently.
Yes.
And some people for the first year go on with their lives and act like nothing happened. Some people cannot get out of bed. It's different for everybody. And I think that families tend to get mad at each other.
They do.
Right. Why are you not sad? It's the first Christmas without our son. Or why are you not more upset about this? Or why are you acting so upset about this? And everybody gets mad at each other. And did you find that going to a counselor was really helpful in terms of helping you all to respect each other's boundaries and respect each other's grieving process?
Absolutely. I would recommend it for any family that goes through this, because I do have a lot of parents that, somebody will ask me, can you reach out to so-and-so? She just lost her child. And that's always a complaint of theirs. It's my husband. He's just doing his thing. He's living his life. Why is he not upset? And I try to explain to her, everybody's different. It's not that he's not grieving. He is. But we all grieve differently, and you have to give him his space and understand that. I mean, there's a lot of marriages that have probably broken up over the loss of a child.
The majority. Statistics show that the loss of a child is very predictive of divorce or separation. And yeah, it really drives families apart. And I think, like you said, it's because the grieving process is so different. It's so different. And we have a hard time when we're in our own grief. We have a hard time understanding why somebody doesn't seem to be feeling the same way that we feel.
Exactly. And I'm even a product of that, because there's times that I'm in a lot of different groups with parents who lost children to overdose. And some of them will say, like, as you said, that for like the first year, they couldn't get out of bed. They were on medication. I was thinking, and I'll think to myself, like, oh my God, I went back to work. I was functioning. Like, did I not grieve my son the way I should have? Like,
Yep.
what's wrong with me? Why was I able to function? But, we're different.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's a great point, is that there's also a lot of shame around the
Yes.
grieving process for those who did go back to work and
Right.
did continue on their lives. And then you see other people whose lives fell apart, and you think, well, what does that mean about me? Does it mean that I didn't love my child as much as that person? It has you thinking all these kinds of shameful thoughts and guilt. And
That's so true. And I think at times I even felt like when I was at work, like, are people looking at me thinking, look at her, she's okay. Like, she lost her son and she's working now. Yeah, I mean, it was a few months, but I didn't stay out of work that long. I think I needed to go back to work. I was afraid that if not, I would cocoon and just get worse and worse.
yeah. And not only did you go back to work, but you also all that you have accomplished in 10 years. And again, I know we say it's coming up on 10 years, and that might seem like a long time, but to somebody who's experienced grief, I should say, 10 years is not a long time.
Not at all.
Not
honestly.
even a little bit.
No. It's weird because it is and it isn't. I just said to my daughter not long ago, I said, oh my God, it's been 10 years. I can't believe that my son has not been here in physical form in 10 years, that I have not seen him. It's just, I remember when Sal was actively using and I was always so scared. I would say, oh my God, something ever happens to him. Oh, I don't know what I would do. I don't think I could even live any longer. And now it's 10 years later and I'm still here and life is going on. And I think the things that scare me are, of course, there's no sense of his smell anywhere because before I'd be able to go in his room and smell his clothes and it still smelled like him. I could remember his voice, but I'm losing that now. Like those things, like I have to keep reminding myself what he heard, what he sounded like. And it's just weird things that are happening to me now coming up with a 10-year.
Yep.
It's just like people are going to forget him or I'm afraid that people are going to say, oh, it's been 10 years. You should be fine. Right. But I'm not.
No. It's, the process is, even though you've done so much to make sure that people do not suffer in the way that you have.
Right.
But even after 10 years and even with all you've done, that pain is still there.
It is. And it's never going to go away. Anyone who tells anybody that it gets easier or gets better is lying. I don't care what anybody says. It never gets easier because I still go to bed every single night. And the last thing that I think of is Sal. And when I open my eyes in the morning, the first thing I think of is Sal and the thought that he's really gone and I got to get out of this bed and I got to go through another day without him. And that's not easy.
How do you do it? And when you say it doesn't get any easier, is that sort of raw pain still the same as it was in 2010? Or has the pain sort of shifted shapes a little bit? Does it look a little bit different now?
Yes, it's definitely shifted shapes, as you say. It definitely does, but it's still there, and like you say, it's there in a different form. Because if I sit and think, like if I put myself to like really think hard about Sal and his life when I'm alone at nights, and imagine what he went through, that it comes back almost like the same pain because I'm reliving him and thinking about what he went through. And that just makes me so sad because I feel like any children or people who are suffering with addiction, it's just very sad. It's just sad. It's a sad life for them. They don't want to be like that. And it's so hard for other people to understand what this disease does to somebody.
It's so hard. And, I read a lot of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with David Kessler, who is a grief expert, and he also lost his son to an overdose. And one of the things that he talks about is even though the pain doesn't go away, it does, as I mentioned earlier, shift a little bit and take on different forms. And one of the things he talks about is this new concept of the sixth stage of grief, which he calls finding meaning. And he wrote a whole book on it, and he dedicated a chapter specifically to to parents who have lost children. And when I look at your bio, I see how much meaning you have found. I can see it from the outside, but do you see it?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I see it. And that's, I think, also what helps me to keep going, because when I get really sad and start feeling like that, I think of all the accomplishments and everything I've done. And I know that my son did not die in vain. He has saved so many lives. Sadly, from his death, so many lives have been saved. And that means the world to me because I know that would make him happy. And I do. I think of all the accomplishments and everything that's been done. And I feel proud. I do.
Oh, it makes me
Yeah.
so happy to hear you say that because I I look at you and I look at all that you do and I just think it is so admirable and you have taken such unbearable pain and you have created meaning in the most heroic way. I mean, because of you, you save lives, I would guess every day, every
Yeah.
single day, because of
Yeah.
you and because of your son and his story. And you did mention your son has a son,
He
right?
does. Yes. He's 11 years
And
old.
oh, can
I
you
know.
talk a little bit about, is there any kind of healing that you find in spending time with him?
Uh, that's another bittersweet, because I have this beautiful grandson, and I actually feel privileged that I have a piece of my son still. A piece of him is here because I talk to so many parents who say, I wish my child had a child so that I could have a piece of them. And I almost like I'm so lucky because I have that. And he brings me such joy. But then there's times where it's upsetting for me because, Father's Day comes around and he doesn't have a father and he's 11 years old now and he knows how his father passed. We told him because it's important. But
Yes.
I feel like, here's a little boy who will never truly know the great person his father was. And if we don't erase the stigma, he's going to think that his father was a bad person from what he's going to hear on the streets. And that scares me. So I constantly talk about Sal and to his son because I want him to know how proud I always was of his father and what a good person he was. And I love having him in my life. It's amazing to have him.
Yeah, it's the part of your son that is able to stay and that
Yes,
you're able to have contact with and you are able to, it's so important, I think, that you are talking to him about how his father passed because it does reduce stigma and
yes,
shame surrounding addiction. And also it's important for him to know that his father was so much more than
his
an
disease.
addict.
Exactly. And
Right.
thank you.
His disease. He was so much more than his disease. There's so much more to people than what they struggle with. And
Exactly.
somebody with depression would not be labeled like, oh, there's the depression.
Exactly.
But we tend to say, there's the
Oh,
addict.
yeah. If there's a theft somewhere, I was probably some junkie. It's just always it,
Yes.
it's just always negative comments, and it has to stop.
Absolutely. If you could, what is some advice that you would give somebody who is actively using, does want to seek help, but fears that stigma? What's something you might say to somebody?
I always say, come forward, share your story, never be ashamed. I tell anybody, please don't be ashamed. I mean, in Camden County, you could call us any day and we'll give out free funding and we'll help you get into, detox treatment. It's just people need to know that their life matters. It truly does. You know what? And they should never be ashamed of what they're going through, because there's people out there that, I mean, there's people on the streets that just need somebody to reach out to them and just let them know that they care about them. I was doing handouts in Camden when the 911 law or the Overdose Prevention Act, the same as the 911 law, giving out the palm cards to let them know that there's a 911 legislation.
Oh,
And I would walk through Camden and hand them out and just seeing their reaction when they knew that I was there because I cared and I was giving that. And the Camden police would do this with me. And it made such a difference when an officer went up to somebody and said, here, we want to give you some information if you need help, or if you're with somebody who's overdosing, we won't arrest you. Please know this law is in effect. And, their eyes would light up because you could tell they just want to know that they mean something. They're somebody.
Absolutely. And they want to know that it's not too late, because
It's
I
never too
think
late.
so many people who struggle with addiction feel like it's too late for me.
And
It's
it's
just too
not.
late.
No, I say it's never too late. And
No.
people complain about, saving someone's life maybe 10 times with naloxone on 10 different times. I don't care, because you know what? Maybe on that 11th time when that person is saved, maybe then they'll go into treatment and we'll save their life going forward. I don't care how many times it takes.
Oh, so you're saying people have almost sort of added to the stigma because they're saying that they've used naloxone, which is also known as Narcan, by the way.
Correct. Yes.
People are saying that they've used it, several times on the same person, and this person clearly doesn't want help, or,
Exactly.
they write that person off.
Right. And, think about it. If that's your child, I would want him to be saved as many times as he could until he finds that moment that he wants treatment.
Yes.
I don't care
And
what it
it's
takes.
absolutely. And it's the same thing with, let's say if somebody was struggling with an eating disorder, you don't expect somebody to just stop and
No.
never relapse again. That is the expectations that we place on people who battle addictions are just unbelievable, because we expect them to just go into treatment, get
Right.
clean, and then that's it.
Yep.
But it doesn't work like that. And the problem is, unfortunately, their addiction is more life-threatening than other addictions.
Exactly. And
But
also there isn't, continuum care. When people come out of treatment, there's no continuum care. It's just, okay, you finished treatment, see ya. Some go to sober living, but not, people don't, there's so much more that needs to be done, because initially there's a reason you picked up and tried something. And usually it's because you don't feel good about yourself. You're looking for an outlet. So you need, to sit and go to, speak to someone. You need, after you come out of treatment, to continue seeing somebody and having a one-on-one, therapist that you talk to, because there's something inside of you that you aren't happy with. And you're not going to get that information in 2 weeks in treatment.
I totally agree. I mean, going to an intensive treatment program for 2 to 3 weeks or 30 days or even 90 days, and then you come home. When you come home, that's when the hardest work begins.
Exactly. And if you don't have support systems, sadly, you're probably going to relapse.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I think a lot of places I went wrong. And like I said, I wasn't familiar with anything. The first time Sal went away to treatment and he came home, I was just like, I thought he was fine. I was like, oh, he went to treatment. He's cured. I had no clue, and it wasn't long after he was home that he ended up relapsing, and I just didn't get it.
Right.
And, I think that has to change, and we need to have that continuum care. And I think the families need to be educated how to deal with them when they come out of treatment.
Yes, because addiction is often a coping skill. And like you said,
Exactly.
somebody usually picks up an addiction because they are trying to numb something out.
Exactly.
And until you get to the core of that, their risk of relapsing is always going to be heightened.
I agree.
Now, in terms of the work that you're doing right now, do you have any big projects that you're working on?
Well, right now we have coming up in Camden County, August 31st is International Overdose Awareness Day. So what that means for Camden County is that the Ben Franklin Bridge and City Hall in Camden will be lit purple for overdose. Purple's the color that we wear for overdose. Also at Timber Creek Park in Gloucester Township. Have you been to that area?
I have, yes.
Have you seen the memorial that's being installed there? The big
No, I
purple ribbon?
haven't.
So there's a Hope and Remembrance Memorial for overdose victims that is being built at Timber Creek Park. It's going to be finished for August 31st, and we'll have a ribbon cutting. And what it is there's pavers family members are able to buy to remember their loved one. And it's just an area for families who have lost someone to an overdose to go and reflect and sit. And it's an absolute beautiful sight. So
Oh,
we'll do the ribbon cutting on the 31st, and we'll also do the overdose remembrance vigil that night. It's the first big event for Camden County right now since COVID. So we're working very hard to ensure that, it's a safe event and we're covering every precaution we can. And
Wow.
it will be live streamed on Facebook also.
So you are still going,
Oh
still
yeah.
making meaning. I know you're just getting started, aren't you?
It's just, it's important to me to make sure that our children are heard through us and the parents that I feel like I need to be there to represent parents who were lost like I was. I had no idea what to do and how to deal with things. And what I've learned, I want to share with other parents to help them.
In an effort that you can help somebody and maybe reduce somebody's suffering, even just a little bit, it makes it all worth it.
It does. Also, I just want to share that Camden County has 2 free programs. One is HALO, which is healing after loss of an overdose, and a specific group sessions for parents or anyone who lost somebody to an overdose. Because, as we spoke, even after your child's death, we're a little bit stigmatized as parents who lost somebody to an overdose because our child's passing or death is not seen the same as other losses that parents have. If it was, cancer, car accident.
Exactly.
Ours is almost as if people look at us and are like, well, what did you expect was going to happen?
Yep.
So I never found that I could just go to a grief group and feel comfortable sharing South stories. So Camden County created HALO, which is specific for overdose. And they've also just created HALO Youth. And that's for 12 to 17-year-olds who have lost either a parent or a relative to an overdose. So they're two great, and they're both free, and they're at the Living Proof Recovery Center. I could send you the information for both of those.
Yeah, that would be great. And that's just in Camden County.
Yes.
Okay. I think that that's so important because people who have lost loved ones due to an overdose, it's a different type of grief because of the stigma. As you said, people look at it differently and people tend to have less sympathy and they tend to not want to talk about it as much. And it's very important to, if anybody out there is listening who is thinking of joining a grief group for the loss of a loved one due to an overdose, try to find a group that is specific to loss from an overdose, because I think that you'll get much more out of it.
Yes. And there is another one that's throughout the United States. It's called GRASP, GRASP, and that's specific to a loss with substance use. And you could just Google that on the internet, and different area, different GRASP in different locations will come up that you could find one in your area.
Oh, that's perfect. And what I will do is I'll link that website for everybody in the show notes so that you all can have easy access to it for those of you who are looking. And I think the final thing that I wanted to ask you, Patty, is with all the work that you do for others and in the way in which you've dedicated your whole life to saving others, what are some things that you do for yourself to get a little bit of relief from everything that you've been through?
Well, I don't do a lot. Self-care for me is honestly spending time with my family and with my grandchildren. Like, that's honestly where I find my joy and where I relax. I'm just most comfortable with my immediate family, and I love being with my grandchildren. I go to work every day. I come home and my life is my grandchildren. So that's what makes me happy. My daughter, I go to her house on the weekend. She has a pool in the back, and we just relax and we enjoy our life and make memories.
That's beautiful. Family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Family, family, family. It's so healing. It's so healing. And I'm so thankful and glad and happy that you are able to be present with your family and still make good memories in spite of everything that you've been through. And I think it's important for people to hear that yes, in the aftermath of trauma and loss, there is overwhelming pain, crippling pain, but that it is possible to have happy memories in the aftermath of it.
It absolutely isn't. Just one thing I just want to add to that, if you don't mind, is
not at all.
Originally, like in the first year when Sal first passed, whenever we spoke about Sal, my daughter and myself, it was always all the bad stuff. It was always like, oh, remember when he did this? Remember when he got caught stealing? Like, we just kept reliving all of his addiction life. And then someone told my daughter Blake, they said, stop doing that. Put that away. That's gone. When you remember your brother, remember the good brother, the brother that was present, your brother that you grew up with, when Sal was not using, when Sal was, a part of your family, all the good memories you had with him. And going forward, that's what we do now, because that always makes us smile, So we share stories about Sal, we share the fun times and the goofy times, and we put aside those bad times because that wasn't truly him anyway. That was the shell of him acting out from his disease.
Yes.
We need to remember the person Sal truly was. And I advise anyone who loses someone to substance use to remember that, and to just always remember the good times with their child or their loved one.
Yes. And that's what helps you hold on, is those good memories.
Yes.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. I know that you made yourself really vulnerable today, and I really appreciate it. And I know that our listeners will appreciate it. You are one brave woman. So thank you for all that you do and for all the lives that you've saved. And quite honestly, I can't wait to see what you continue to do in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you airing this because, again, raising awareness. So thank you.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. For more information about today's episode and to sign up for the Light After Trauma newsletter, head over to my website at Alyssa Scolari.Com. I'm also on Twitter, and I'd love to chat with you guys. Be sure to follow me. My Twitter handle is Alyssa Scolari. Thanks again for listening, and take good care.